So we're here today to talk about, I guess you could say, the pros and cons of do-it-yourself horse training. Should I train my own horse? And that's very much an individual question. It's one we all have to answer for ourselves. Thought I'd roll out some thoughts and sort of criteria that you could consider when making that decision. And I will sort of preface it by saying that this is basically the confession of a lifelong do-it-yourselfer. Except for a few years when I was in my 20s, training horses has never been my primary occupation. In fact, I haven't done it as a business in many years. I've been training my own horses and helping some friends out and so on for quite a long time. So I'm in the same boat as everybody else in terms of, what's the skill level that I need? What's the skill level that I have? How do I fit my horse? How can I advance that horse? What help should I get? The first thing that I really need to make clear is there never should be any such thing as a true, total do-it-yourselfer. That would mean that you reinvented the alphabet. You reinvented the wheel. There's no need for that, and it's counterproductive, really. In my years with horses since the late 1950s, or about 1960, I've gotten help from countless people that really did a lot for me, many of them professional horse trainers, really good horsemen. And one thing that we need to be careful of is there's a tendency among folks who want to do it themselves and who've embraced the natural horsemanship concept to kind of demonize horse trainers. Folks, horse trainers are a great resource. And while some people disagree with traditional horse training methods, there are a ton of guys out there that have a lot of expertise, and they're generously willing to share it with you if you have an open mind and the right attitude. So don't ignore that. Don't ignore other resources you may have. Clinics. Clinics are great as far as they go. They give you ideas, concepts, ways to do things, but they're really no substitute for having a bit of help in doing things day to day. Because you may be doing something that seems superficially exactly like what you saw the clinician doing, but you're doing it at the wrong time or the wrong level of intensity, where an on-site real-time helper, trainer, can say to you, no, you're not doing that quite right. You've got to move your hand like this, not like this, or vice versa. So those are things to think about. Use those resources. We live in an age of information, and people can get a lot of knowledge. The question is, can you transform that knowledge into skill, into the ability to really bring your horse along? So sort of a checklist you might want to think about is evaluate yourself. What's your level of expertise? What's your physical ability? There are some folks that, for a variety of reasons, don't have the physical wherewithal to start a young horse. There are some people who don't have the confidence to start a young horse. Those are very real considerations, because it should be a pleasurable, fulfilling experience, not a frustrating and frightening one. So the other thing to take into account is your level of experience, the competence you have in working with horses, and importantly, your goals. What do you want to accomplish? So if you want a good horse to ride across country, there may be less technical elements for you to address, and you may be better qualified or perfectly well qualified to bring a horse along for that purpose. On the other hand, if you really want to show 3-year-old horses in the Reign and Futurity every year at the big show in Oklahoma City, the odds of doing that on your own are much lower than somebody who just wants to bring along a respectful, pleasant riding horse. So evaluate your goals, decide if they're realistic, and decide what compromises you maybe want to make. Maybe you do involve a trainer to help you directly with your horse. Maybe you want to send your horse away for training. There's no shame in that. There's a difference between teaching a horse and maintaining a horse. And many more people are capable of maintaining a horse very adequately, but they may not be able to introduce the new concepts to the horse and get the horse started. The other thing to think about is, are you confident in the sense that you're not fearful? If you're afraid, get somebody who can hold your hand a little bit. Again, no shame in that. It's a worse situation to try to convince yourself that you can do it when you really don't have the courage to handle a horse who may be a little challenging and who may get more challenging if you don't bring the right tools and the right attitude to the table. The other thing you want to think about is your partner, your horse. Is he the right horse to match your goals and your skill level? So you may have a very happy-go-lucky, easygoing horse that you just want to get a little more finished, that has a start on him. That's one level of difficulty. You may have a real sensitive horse who is very reactive, and it's a 2-year-old and you're going to start it. Big difference in the skill requirements, the time commitments, and frankly the risk that's involved in undertaking those two different things. The other things you can think about is the horse's ability. For example, if you have a nice, pleasant half-draft horse who would be a great horse to ride across country, maybe do actual ranch work on, maybe he's not the horse you want to try to turn into a cow horse or a cutting horse or a reiner. They're just not going to have the right abilities. So don't frustrate yourself by trying to force a square peg into a round hole. The other thing to think about is your facilities. You don't need anything fancy, but you have to have at least a certain baseline depending on what you're doing. It's pretty hard to make a trail horse that's really reliable from a 2-year-old if all you do is go out and go trail riding. You need to put the basics on the horse. If you've got a nice quiet horse and you've got some background, you can do it with pretty stripped down facilities. But if all you've got is a pasture full of rocks on a slope or 40 acres of swamp, you really need to have a flat spot to ride this young horse if you're going to start one and advance the horse. Now, if you have a horse that's already broke, or if you can haul him away a bit, you can put some finish on him without having much in the way of facilities. If you pan out across there, Kim, just sort of show the field. When I moved here, when we moved here in 1987, the only thing we had was this field. I didn't have the square riding area, I didn't have the round pen, and I had a good gelding and two 2-year-olds among my horses that I needed to start. And Jose, the gelding, was absolutely my best partner I could ask for. And I got those 2-year-olds to where I could pony them real reliably. They just snuggle right up to me. I did a lot of groundwork right here in the field. And one day I'm sitting on Jose, I've got the young horse snubbed up to him, and irresponsibly maybe, but it worked with both of them, I just slipped from Jose to the colt and dallied up to Jose and said, "Buddy, just drag this colt around a little bit." Well, the horse bounced in the air a few times, but Jose ponied many a colt, and he just walked out across, toted the colt with him, sort of made his own circle around the field. I didn't care where he went. Got the horse moving forward. I undallied and went for a ride. Was that risky? Hell yeah, but it's kind of cool too. But I wouldn't recommend it if you're going to start 2-year-olds, but you can do it. And if you had 30 days of riding in on those 2 young horses, this flat field would have been absolutely what you needed to just get them sorted out and get them going well enough to go for a good trail ride, well enough to do some basic show ring maneuvers. So you gotta bear in mind that you don't have to have the fanciest facilities, but you've gotta have something that isn't gonna disadvantage you. Nice to have a round pen, nice to have a good sized flat arena with good footing. That's wonderful. It's dandy, especially in our climate, to have an indoor arena. But I've gotten along in the horse business my whole life and never had an indoor that I regularly used, never had one on my place. So you can really get by with a lot less, but you can't ignore the fact that you have to have those basics. The other thing that you've got to have is time. You've got to have the commitment of time if you're going to really develop a horse. That's one of the reasons why horse trainers are successful, why they get so much more done than the average person is. If your horse is at a reliable trainer, he's going to ride that horse 4 to 6 times a week. That really brings a horse along, that consistency, that regular work. Where people will say, well, I put 30 days riding in on this colt. Well, no, they rode him once and then 30 days passed. And in amongst those 30 days, they got on him a handful of times. That's not the same as concentrated training that you'd get from a professional. So just bear in mind that if nothing else, you can outlast that horse. You can put in the time you need to do to get that horse going forward, doing the things you need to do, but you've got to get on their back. And if your other commitments, family, work, one thing or another, prevent you from doing that, maybe the do-it-yourself route isn't the way to go, at least for advancing your horse. Maybe you just have enough time to maintain a horse and somebody else helps you get started. Or maybe you need to buy a horse that's already there and then you can maintain it. All of those things you have to balance. There are great things about training your own horse. There's a real sense of fulfillment when you've done it yourself and you and the horse have kind of got a good thing going. It can also be enormously frustrating when it doesn't work out. And the one thing that I remember one of my mentors said to me when I said I was going to start training horses more seriously, he said, well, that's good. Just remember, before you make one, you're going to ruin a truckload of them. He was right. What I didn't realize was how damn big that truck was going to be. Not that the horses that were in that truckload of ruined ones were ruined or compromised or unable to live a productive life, but they sure didn't meet their potential. And that's going to happen. You can be as meticulous as you want, but until you've got a bunch of these things under your belt, you're not going to have the sort of organized program that lets you really make as nice a horse as you'd like to, unless you're either really talented or you have an exceptional horse. So I've been talking for a while. I just want to give you a little continuum of a number of people that I know who fall different places in the do-it-yourself spectrum. One lady is a very competent rider. She's a good horsewoman. She has a lot of work demands on her. She has the wherewithal to keep her horse in training, and she does, 12 months of the year. She shows that horse. She does a good job of showing the horse. She regularly rides it whenever she has time, which is fairly frequently, but it would not have been enough for her to advance the horse or maybe even maintain the horse. But with the support she has, she can enjoy this nice horse who remains tuned, ready to go. Boy, to me, that's a success story. It's just a little different success story than what I'm after. But given her circumstances, it was a realistic choice to make, and really, it was for the best interest of her and the horse. Now, another couple that I know routinely buy young horses. They bring these horses along. They get them to a level where they're quite successful showing them. They're broke, pleasant, reliable horses. Are they as polished as what you would have from a highly skilled professional? Probably not. But do they get a lot of satisfaction out of those horses? Yes. Do those horses really perform almost better for them because of the relationship? I absolutely believe that to be the case. And to me, that's another success story. Our neighbor over, just the next farm over, decided to get into horses a few years ago, and he did everything wrong and it all worked out pretty well. First thing he bought was a great big half Percheron gelding, who was probably 16 hands and weighed 1,400 pounds. And he announced that he could afford him, he owned him, and he was going to break him to ride and train him. And you know, that was the right horse because he was even-tempered. He didn't have a lot of talent, but Jerry, my neighbor, didn't need a high-performance horse. And he'd come over here and he'd ride in the ring. He'd use the round pen a little bit. But as soon as that horse got safe, he pointed him across country, and we've got a lot of open land around here, and we've got about an 800-acre park that he would regularly ride down to, ride that horse everywhere in the park. And you know, after a period of months, that horse got very nice, but he got ridden a lot. And he got to a level of real reliability as a trail mount. Now, could you go out and lope a circle on him? Probably not. Did Jerry care one damn whether that was the case? He certainly didn't, because that horse was reliable transportation. And over the next few years, he got intrigued with this, and he bought probably 4 or 5 young horses, brought them along, made nice trail horses out of them, sold them, moved on to the next one. And each one of them, he just outlasted. He had one that was really touchy, and I said, Jerry, you don't want to start this one yourself. And he agreed. Sent him up to a friend of mine who's a really good colt starter. He rode the horse for about 6 weeks. I think he put some extra time in on it because he liked Jerry, and Jerry just couldn't really afford to send him longer. Sent him back and said, I don't know if you're going to take this horse out across country right away. Well, he picked him up a Friday night. Saturday morning, I saw Jerry riding by on the way to the park. And that horse was jumping in the air, turning sideways, trying to buck him off. And he just kept his head pointed to the park. Usually, Jerry's ride down through the park would take 3.5 hours. About 9 hours later, I saw him coming back up the road. The horse's head was down, he was relaxed. Jerry's head was down, he looked tired as hell. But he had taken him down there, ridden his usual circuit, and as Jerry said to me, the only way to find out if he was going to do it was to do it. Next day was Sunday. I see Jerry going down the road. The horse is a little better than the day before. And about 5 hours later, coming back up the road, the horse is stepping right along. Jerry looks a little more chipper. And within a few weeks, he had that horse going up and down to the park regularly. But in between his trail rides, he brought him back here to our place, got him in the round pen, and just kept him from backsliding. And the funny thing was, he was a horse that would really refuse to steer, and Jerry didn't have a big high skill level. So I said, here's how you tie a tail knot. Tie his head around to his tail, one direction, let him sort of boil around there, tie him around the other direction. You should be good to go. I'll get some criticism for that, but I'll tell you, I wanted to save Jerry's life, and it did nothing but improve this horse that needed some improvement. We always knew when Jerry was here. My daughter would say, she was just a little kid then, she'd say, I believe Jerry's out there, Dad. And I'd say, well, Kim, how do you know? I can see the dust. And he'd be out there and that horse would be boiling around in the circle, and after a bit the dust would simmer down. Pretty quick, Jerry'd be riding the horse around the round pen. He'd ride him over to his house. And you know what? That horse became as reliable as can be because Jerry just didn't go away. And the horse finally ran up the white flag and said, let's be friends, and they were. So that's the middle of the range. Now, a few months ago, a nice gal came down here just to chat with me a little bit about her horse that she'd bought. And it kind of scared me to death. She had bought herself a 2-year-old horse that was barely handled. She was trying to put some groundwork on. She had put a couple of rides on it, and she was determined to do all of this herself. I don't know right now how that story is coming out, but I'm a little afraid for her because that's a big bite to take. This person had no skills, no experience. I think she had some talent, I really do. But it's a big risk to say to yourself, I'm going to start this young horse. It's a risk for the horse's future because it may not go well and the horse may develop some bad behaviors and not have the brightest future. And it can be bad for your health if you decide to do what Jerry did and got away with, and he had the background to do it, head him down the valley. You can't do that unless you've got some background. And I worry about people who have this vision that I absolutely understand, but it may be a fantasy vision, not reality. Do get help. Don't ignore the professionals. Don't ignore the educational opportunities. Recognize your strengths and weaknesses. Recognize your horse's nature and abilities. Do what you can. Recognize what you can't do, and don't try to do that. And you're going to have a good experience as a do-it-yourselfer. Think about that. I hope it helps.